I cannot even tell you the amount of times women have been in my office and they have told me, sometimes even in tears, that they were just told that this is normal, this is how it is now. Try Kegel exercises, just relax. Like these are very common things that women are being told that frankly are not working and sometimes making it worse.
Wow. Welcome to the Skills for Moms podcast, where we equip you with tools for wholehearted living. I know so many moms in particular who cannot live wholehearted due to pelvic floor issues that they often don't even feel comfortable talking about because of the shame. Today, we're going to cover pelvic health across the lifespan, from toilet training all the way to perimenopause, and bust some common myths about pelvic floor physical therapy. I am so thrilled to welcome my own pelvic floor physical therapist, Becky Allen, to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Yay! I am seriously so excited about this, Grace. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, you have helped me through 2 pregnancies and 2 postpartum times and have opened my eyes to pelvic floor PT is not just about down there and healing scar tissue. There was after one birth, you were helping me with my diaphragm that needed
Yeah.
releasing and breathing techniques. And so I just want to open up the can of worms that pelvic PT is not just for women who just had a baby, and it isn't just about down there. It's like our whole bodies are connected, and you show that so well.
Oh my gosh, music to my ears. I'm so glad you learned something from your time with me. No, I'm just kidding. But I love
Yeah.
it. You hit it though. You hit the nail on the head. It's way more than your pelvic floor. Pelvic floor function is more than your pelvic floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to give our audience a brief background on you because you are so knowledgeable. You're a thought leader, really influencing people around the globe through your online platforms. And so I just want to give them a background of who you are. So Becky founded Genesis Pelvic Physical Therapy and Wellness with a bold vision to transform the way pelvic floor therapy is delivered, understood, and experienced. You are passionate about whole body healing, not just focusing on one area, but realizing how we're all interconnected. And you have 5 branches in Dallas area, as well as virtual appointments all across the globe, and really impact people through your social media accounts, through your physical therapist and occupational therapist training
Mhm.
opportunities. And you really stand by your philosophy that you have to treat the whole person. You can't just focus on isolated symptoms. You've got to look at the whole person. And so I'm just so thrilled to have you on today and feel so flattered and honored that you would come on my podcast. So thank you for being here, Becky.
Oh my gosh. Any opportunity to just educate the world to stop doing Kegels. You know what I'm saying?
And I mean, just that might sound like a no brainer to some people, but I think for some, they're like, what are you talking about? That's the only thing I've ever heard that you're supposed to do. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that one?
Yeah, I would love nothing more than to elaborate. So, Kegels are kind of well known as the go-to pelvic floor strengthening exercise. And it stems back from actually the 1940s. There's a man named Dr. Kegel, that was his last name. And he technically didn't invent the Kegel, but he named the Kegel after
Yeah.
himself and kind of deemed this exercise as the end all be all to strengthen, improve, whatever you want to call it, your pelvic floor function. And
Sure.
it started from women, females,
Mhm.
but all a Kegel is it's literally just a squeeze or a clench of your pelvic floor muscles, kind of like you're stopping your flow of urine midstream. And that's all
Mhm.
it is. And so
Mhm.
for so long, that one little movement or exercise, quote unquote, if we want to call it an exercise, is what women have been told to do to fix all of their pelvic floor problems,
Sure.
even
Yeah.
if they're told anything at all, to be frank. But
Mhm.
what we've come to know now is that the pelvic floor muscles are typically the victim of something,
Mhm.
something somewhere else. It could be nervous system, it could be gut dysfunction, it could be hip dysfunction, it could be
Mhm.
you're wearing bad shoes and your feet aren't moving, it could be your
Yeah.
diaphragm. There's so many causes. And so this idea of just do Kegel exercises to quote strengthen your pelvic floor muscles is just very, very incomplete. And it's doing everyone, women included, across
Mhm.
the world a disservice whenever we tell them that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I remember going to pelvic PT before you for the first time, kind of not knowing what it was or what I was getting into, and I found out I actually had really tight pelvic tone.
Mhm.
Like I had background running, and so a lot of my exercises had nothing to do with tightening. It was about actually learning to fully lengthen and relax those muscles.
Mhm.
And I know for other people, sometimes it's a coordination, like it's like
100%.
the timing of things. So that was a huge aha of like, oh, maybe it's that I don't need to do more tensing. Maybe I need to learn how to relax these muscles. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If you think back to before you or just anyone started having pelvic floor symptoms, you never thought about your pelvic floor, right? You were never thinking, okay, let me tighten it. Okay, let me let it go. You just lived your life. You just used the bathroom or jumped on a trampoline or went for a run or chased your kid or sneezed or laughed, whatever it is, you just did it and your pelvic floor did its job without you ever thinking about it. And so that's a big disconnect that bothers me is I'm like, so why do we say then that now that that there are symptoms that we now suddenly for the rest of our lives have to do these exercises, these Kegels, think about our pelvic floor all the time when what we really should be doing as licensed PTs and OTs is restoring the function of the pelvic floor itself. And you said it perfectly. Any muscle in the whole body needs to be able to lengthen. We don't just want to walk around with our elbows clenched and bent, then our bicep is just
Mhm.
tight all the time. That
Yes.
needs to be able to lengthen as well. It's the same with your pelvic floor.
Yeah. And I mean, that's good word for me because I just finished doing pelvic PT after my fifth baby. And
All the
sometimes I
babies.
get, yes, right. I have these guilt trips of like, oh my goodness, I haven't done my PT exercises in a while. But then I realize, oh, I'm lifting heavy kids. I'm moving into a new home. I'm doing all these things with my pelvic floor in
Mhm.
mind. So I am strengthening and
Yeah,
doing those things without always doing the exercises, if you will.
right. Well, and
Like they
that's
were like a tool to get to where I'm at, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
that's exactly kind of what your phase of rehab should look like is there is a time and a place for connecting with your core muscles, your pelvic floor, and just understanding what does that even mean? How does it all work together? How does it contract? How does it relax? That is an early piece of the puzzle. And then we move into more of the, traditional, what you think of when you think of PT, right? There's exercises, there's manual therapy, there's all that. We do all of that just like if you came for low back pain we would progress through certain exercises to make you more mobile, stronger, all of these things. And then you would progress into your normal life. We would, how do we integrate that into your normal life so that you're no longer, if we're going with the low back pain example, I don't want you thinking about your back all the time for the rest of your life. I
Mhm.
want to actually restore the functions so you can go live your life with all this newfound mobility and strength so
Yeah,
that your
yeah.
back doesn't hurt for the rest of time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it seems like sometimes pregnancy or it could be close to menopause for women.
Mhm.
Why would you say there's certain periods of a woman's life where all of a sudden they realize, "Oh, I just sneezed and leaked," and that never happened before? Why are there certain periods that it seems to become aware, "Hey, something's not right?"
Yeah, yeah. So you named it pregnancy, postpartum, kind of around menopause, perimenopause time. Those are 3 huge periods in a female's life where we are more vulnerable to pelvic floor symptoms like leaking, pelvic pain, pressure and heaviness type symptoms from prolapse. There's a handful of things that symptoms wise that we can experience, and there's a few different kind of common reasons that they kind of quote flare up during these times. But the similarity between all of them is that usually the pregnancy or the postpartum or the menopause, perimenopause time is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's kind of like the one more thing that your body is like, "Ooh, okay, this one is too much. I can no longer compensate for maybe what's been happening already for years." Because our bodies are master compensators. They're great. We don't have to have perfect bodies. We're made not to be perfect. We're, in human bodies, we're aging, we're, all the things. But at a point, there's going to come a time where our pelvic floor is like, "Ooh, hold on a second. I can't keep doing it all, actually." And so that's kind of what happens. Like, take pregnancy. We have some hormonal changes, so that's changing kind of the actual bones of the pelvis and the stability there. We have a growing belly, so there's a weight component as well as what's called like a center of gravity shift component, and all that means is kind of your balance changes. So as the belly grows bigger and forward, it kind of pulls you there. That actually tips your pelvis and puts more pressure on your bladder. And so that's just kind of one example. Perimenopause would be there's hormonal changes that happen that affect the integrity of the muscle tissue. And so it's like, what is the thing during these time periods that made our pelvic floor go, "Okay, I can no longer continue doing everything for everyone. I'm having
Yes.
symptoms now. Someone please help me."
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of like as women, um, I don't remember anyone when I was starting my period saying, "Hey, there's these certain times in your life you need to like really baby yourself.
Mhm,
You need to give yourself some extra TLC. Don't go on that run when you just had a
mhm.
baby. Don't go do this crazy thing." And no one ever told me that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of copy paste, like I should do the same thing every day like a guy does. And it sounds like for women, that's just not, we may be able
Mhm.
to do everything, but not everything at
Yeah.
once or at a certain time, right?
1,000,000%. Yeah, our hormones are like a roller coaster. Guys are more like a straight line. And so it's not that we necessarily need to like watch our cycles like a hawk and proactively make changes, but what I advocate for is I want women to actually learn how to tune into your own body and recognize, "Hey, I feel off today. I feel fatigued." And maybe then you look at your charting and you know that, "Oh, that makes sense. I'm in this part of my cycle." And maybe I'm going to do a yoga today instead of lift heavy. But I want it to be based off of how you feel, not necessarily only by the chart.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of tracking back a little bit, you know, I know our pelvic floor, it even starts with our kids. Like, some of us are just trying to potty train a kid or navigating things like that. And some of those
Mhm.
habits we have, push peeing. I know you
Oh.
cued me in on not push peeing, but could you just kind of highlight how some of those maybe habits we had as a kid that we didn't realize, like bowel bladder stuff, then can play into making that a
Mhm.
a bad cycle when we do get postpartum or in a point of life that's trickier pelvic floor wise.
Yeah. The 2 main kiddo habits that I see kinda compounding and leading up to this adult pelvic floor dysfunction, is constipation or withholding stool. And so anyone who has kids knows that whether you're just potty training or even, into the elementary years, like, kids, for whatever reason, they don't wanna stop, they don't wanna go poop, they don't wanna take the 5
Yeah.
minutes, they don't wanna go in the public
Uh-huh.
place, they don't wanna go to school. And so constipation is a big one because what happens as a kiddo is if they hold stool and remain constipated, which by the way, we need to be going at least one time a day.
Mhm.
So if your kiddo does not go at least once a day, don't panic, but just know that there's resources. You can, call us and we'll help you and your kiddo. But a constipated kiddo, especially over like months and years of their early life, that actually stretches out their rectum and lends itself to constipation as an adult. And when we're
Wow.
constipated, there's
Yeah.
that poop fills up in our pelvis and pushes on your bladder in front of it. And so
Wow.
that can lead to bladder problems and a whole
Wow.
host of other things, pelvic pain,
Yeah.
painful intimacy. So constipation in childhood is a huge, huge, huge one that you want to address. The second
Mhm.
thing in kiddos, moms, I'm not shaming you, but if you do this thing, I'm just gently asking you to stop. And that is having our kiddos pee every time before we leave the house. And
Yeah.
that comes down to our bladders are very trainable. So they if we train our bladders, whether we're a kid or an adult, this happens in adults too, but it's common in kiddos. If we train our bladders to empty before it's fully full, right? Because we know we're about to go to the
Mhm.
grocery
Yep.
store
Yep.
or, on a road trip or whatever. And so every time before we leave the house, we're going and we're emptying our bladder starts to think that we don't want it to fill up all the way. And so it
Mhm.
changes its signaling to us. And so then it's going to tell your kiddo or you, whoever it is experiencing this, more often that you need to go empty your bladder. And it just kind of becomes this cycle. And so I talk about this in the kiddos because I'm guilty of this. I have done this where I'm
Yeah.
like, just please go to the bathroom before
Yes.
we go to soccer practice or whatever it is. Cause I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I know you haven't gone in an hour or two. But the reality is we need to be teaching our kiddos how to listen to their own bodies. And it might
Yeah.
be annoying to have to pause in the middle of soccer practice and run them to the public bathroom, but it's better for
Yeah.
them to have that awareness. And then it's better for their pelvic health in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, it makes me think of hunger fullness with kids. If you're like forcing them to eat, then you might end up with an obese kid.
Yeah.
But with our one of our kids that we potty trained on the earlier side, I was so nervous about him having accidents. I would have him go more often than
Mhm.
needed.
Mhm.
And then even as like, 6, 7-year old, we're having to kind of retrain like, oh no,
Yeah.
you can go 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
Or for myself, like, when you're pregnant, you do have to get up at night to go to the bathroom. That's pretty
Sure.
expected. But then you have to kind of undo that
You
habit
do.
afterwards. Otherwise, you'll like forever be going pee
You
in the middle of
will.
the night. Like,
And that's a big
um,
one is even in postpartum when you're up with baby, do your
mhm.
best to make it to at least 4 in the morning before you go pee.
Yeah.
Now it's different if you're in like a marathon nursing session at 11 or
Yes.
midnight and you chugged a huge thing of water, you might have to go pee. But in
Yeah.
general, if you can make it to at least 4 a.m., that's a pretty great physiologic timeline to be, signaling and training your bladder again of like, hey, we need to be making it through the night. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. I think this was my first time postpartum. I did like a bladder diary for a bit because I
Yeah.
was just like, I'm pretty sure I'm like peeing more than I need to. But then once I saw, hey, I can go 5 hour, 4 hours, then it was like, all right, it's fine. And it kind of went
Yeah.
back to normal. So,
Yeah, data is so, so, so helpful because so many times I ask my own patients, maybe I'm in an eval, I'm, and doing their first session, and I'll say, how often do you go pee? And they're like, oh, like a normal amount. And I'm like, is it every 30 minutes, every hour, every 5 hours? And a lot of them are saying probably every hour. And so I educate them. We really want to be in kind of that 2 to 4 to 5 hour at the most
mhm.
range. And you're not going to kill yourself if you have a day
Yeah.
where you go 8 hours. My nurses, my teachers, I see you, and it's like, I know y'all have teacher bladder and nurse bladder, but just do your best to at least go like at lunch or something.
Yes. Yeah. So getting back to the constipation thing with kids, like what are some little pearls? It sounds like, coming to you guys, seeing your pediatrician to make sure there's
Mhm.
not something
Yeah.
going on. But what are some little pearls to help a mom who maybe has a kid struggling with constipation?
Yeah. So full stop, kiddos with pelvic floor dysfunction, even if you don't know it's constipation, it usually is constipation. That's usually the
Mhm.
main driver of like bedwetting at night,
Mm.
urinary urgency and frequency, UTIs, and especially little girls. So it's a big, big, big thing. So I just wanted to like hone in on that again that we got to get these kids pooping. And to help them do that, a big thing that if you're a mom and you come or a dad, if you bring your kiddo in and you're like, I know this child's constipated, they go days and days and days between poops, then first and
Mhm.
foremost, I do want you to go to your pediatrician and get a KUB x-ray. That's actually going to
Mhm.
tell us the diameter of your rectum. And that's really, really
Yeah.
important because like I mentioned earlier, sometimes that rectum is stretched out. And when it's
Wow.
stretched
Yeah.
out, it doesn't signal your kiddo. So
Yeah.
I'm over here preaching. I'm like, let your kid listen to their body. But if it's stretched out,
Wow.
it's not signaling in time. So there
Wow.
is an intervention that we need to get to in that earlier stage, but we don't know that if we don't know that. So KUB X-ray is what it's called. You could just ask your pediatrician for that, for the diameter of the rectum, and then tell that to your pediatric pelvic PT. So that way we know what's going on. So that's
Yeah.
little perk number one, tip number one. But at home, very simple things like increasing fiber intake is a huge one. Like, just I know kids are picky, but whatever you can find that they'll eat, even if you
Yeah.
sneak it in a cookie or something, like make a sweet
Yes.
potato cookie. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like just sneak that
The
fiber in
fiber.
somehow, and that will make a huge difference. And then a lot of times, they'll do really well with a magnesium supplement, and they make
Yeah.
these little gummies. It's called Calm.
Mhm.
My kids take that. They take
Yeah.
one in the evenings, and It's the certain type of magnesium that promotes bowel regularity, but without giving diarrhea. Now, if you take too many of
Yes.
them, you're going to have diarrhea. But if you just give them one,
That
that's going to be
magnesium citrate,
uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah,
because
that one's citrate.
magnesium bisglycinate, that's more for like calming and sleep.
Mhm.
Is that
Yep,
correct? Okay.
yep. That helps you, your muscles kind of calm down. Then there's
Mhm.
glycinate also, which helps your nervous system
Yes.
calm down. So, but yeah, so fiber, a magnesium supplement, and then it's so underrated, but toilet posture. Get your kids a stool to put
Mm,
their feet on because,
yes.
even adults need the squatty potty. People giggle at that, but it
Yes.
really helps. And the
Yeah.
reason it
Right.
helps when you have a stool under your feet for your stool to come out, right? Is it changes the angle of your pelvis in a way that relaxes the pelvic floor muscles on the back half. So it no
Mhm.
longer kinks off kind of that rectum. And so the poop just gets to like shoot right out. And
Yes.
so toilet posture is huge, 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 huge. So just put a stool, and what you want to look for is you want their knees to be just slightly higher and slightly wider than their hips. That's kind of
Mhm.
that's how you know that the stool's high enough, basically. And
Yeah.
so those three things, plus teaching your kiddo to listen to their body and helping them overcome,
Mhm.
their fear of pooping. Maybe they had
Yes.
a history, maybe they were constipated and it hurt one time, right? Working through a lot of
Yeah.
that. We do a
Yes.
lot of coaching with parents on how to coach their kids through that.
Mhm.
But there's fear. When we're afraid, our pelvic floor clenches, and poop is not going to come out of a clenched pelvic floor.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of nervous system retraining we have to do sometimes too.
And also, would you say, like, not the breath holding bearing down, that they wanna, like, blow it out
Oh my
kind
gosh,
of
yes,
thing?
yes. Look at you. You just know all the things. I love it, I love it. Yeah, so,
Well, working through that with one of my kids, so
yeah. So, I mean, even adults do this too, where we kind of like like hold our breath and we wanna push
Yeah.
or whatever. So kids do the same thing, especially when the stool is, like, hard or larger, which can happen
Mhm.
with the enlarged rectum, or lack of water and all that stuff. So yes, we definitely want to for the kiddos to teach to exhale, just kind of like you're blowing bubbles, or, sometimes you can put a little, like, pinwheel in front of them or have them hold a
Yeah.
pinwheel and blow the pinwheel.
Yeah.
And that way, what that does is it kinda changes the pressures in your
Mhm.
abdomen, so that way it makes it
Mhm.
easier to push the poop out.
Yeah. Thank you. That is so helpful, and I think that's gonna be a big help to a lot of our young moms with young kids, because that is a hard thing. I mean, toilet training is not fun for anyone,
No.
but yeah, and then once you've kind of had it going, maybe not the best, it is hard, I get that, to, like,
It is hard
change
to
things.
backtrack, yeah. There's habits form quickly in kiddos, and we can totally overcome it, but it is harder if you're already farther down the road for sure.
Yeah. And going now more towards, like, that puberty time, like, I know you probably have a lot of patients, perimenopause
Mhm.
and postpartum, but, like, how do you talk about some of these pelvic floor issues with, like, a girl who's maybe about to start her period, or just with sports? How do we be cognizant of that for
Mhm.
that age? Like, I've heard of a couple girls, these are teenagers who had pee episodes, where they're
Yeah.
working too hard and then they peed themselves, so it's
Mhm.
like they're obviously having some pelvic floor dysfunction
Mhm.
even at a young
Yeah.
age.
Yeah. The biggest thing with this population is to reduce shame around it because they wanna keep it a secret, especially
Mm,
depending on their relationship with their own mom, right? That's gonna have a big factor in all of this, but, let's say they even have a great relationship with their mom, they still feel like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I peed my pants," or, "I can't believe,
mm,
like, my period's so heavy," or they have all this
mm,
pain around their period
mhm.
maybe, and they just think that's normal because no one's ever told them. And so I think just doing our best to educate in an effort to reduce shame, like, there's nothing shameful about it. It's just like if your shoulder's hurting. It's just, if my shoulder's hurting, there's something causing that. If your pelvic floor is not functioning well, there's something causing that, and we can do something about it. But the shame is a big piece because that prohibits them from even telling their moms or their doctors or whoever.
Yeah, yeah, and could you, segueing from that, tell us a little bit more about what to expect for someone who's never been to a pelvic PT, and now they're like, "You know what? I think I maybe should get checked," and I know a lot of
Mhm.
people have had a traumatizing experience with
Sure.
the pelvic exam and the speculum and the pap smear. So just
Mhm.
could you, give us a little bit of information about that?
Yeah. The pelvic floor exam with the pelvic floor PT or OT is nothing like at your gynecologist or your OB-GYN. So, obviously, if you've had a bad experience there, naturally you're gonna have some thoughts and questions and potentially fears around what the heck are we actually gonna do. But I always like to say, like, we don't have a speculum. We're not actually, the speculum opens up so they can see your cervix. We don't need to visualize your cervix. We as PTs and OTs, we're assessing musculature, we're assessing muscle tone and strength, we're assessing mobility of the joints. Just like if you were coming for your shoulder, I would look at all of those same things. These muscles just happen to be inside your pelvis. And so, at a typical evaluation or assessment, we're going to start and I'm going to ask you a billion questions. And at Genesis, at least, our evaluation is an hour and a half long when you come in person. And it's precisely for this reason, because I think the answers lie in the patient's story. And so, what we strive to do is ask so many great questions to have a really great hypothesis going into the assessing, the exam, all of that stuff. So that way that stuff just becomes confirmation, rule it in, rule it out, and then move on with treatment.
Yes.
And so
Mhm.
bunch of questions. It's great. We're gonna get to know each other super quick. And then from there, I do like a quote normal PT assessment. I'll look at how you move, how you walk. I'll look at your hips. I'll look at mobility. I am going to check how you breathe. So we're going to look a lot at breathing patterns and rib cage mobility. And then if A, we have time, if B, I think it's indicated, and if C, you have said, yeah, sure, let's do a pelvic floor exam, that is something that we tend to do at pelvic floor therapy. And so that includes kind of externally looking at the tissues, feeling the tissues, and then internally, there's one gloved finger that goes in, and we just work our way through the pelvic floor muscles super gently. The point is not to cause pain. The point is for us to just gather information. And pain is information. So if you have that, we have our techniques and our tactics to be able to reduce that for you and to be less invasive. And we'll kind of grade that patient by patient. So we do that. And then that part's over. And then we go into treatment. So we might do some manual treatment that day. I'm probably going to give you a couple exercises to get you started. I'm going to educate you on what I found, how it's connected to your symptoms, and what the heck we're going to do about it. And well, then we're off to the races. And so that's kind of, in a magic wand, perfect scenario, that's kind of what my first visit with someone would look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I just want to give a little personal story about that. Like, I think after maybe my second or third kid, I guess had some tension, down there, and I didn't even realize it. I wasn't having any pain that I noticed, but then again, when I was getting the internal exam, there were some tender spots, and so just by me deep breathing and the pelvic floor PT putting gentle pressure on that
Mhm.
area, we were able to release those kind of trigger points.
Yeah.
And then the next time we, came to them, they were maybe a little bit sensitive, but not the way they had been the first side. And it was kind of all connected. Like I think it was on the left side, and then, I
Mhm.
had like some left,
Yeah.
body stuff going on. And so it was like, oh, once I work on this, body stuff, then it's going to
Mhm.
help the pelvic floor, how we're all connected. So
Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
I
Yeah.
just, I don't know, manual therapy. I'm like, wait, what does that mean? Some
Yeah.
people, again, if you've never been, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
It's just a fancy way to say hands-on treatment. A massage is manual therapy. Stretching a joint is manual therapy. Doing trigger point release is manual. There's a lot of different kinds, but it's just a fancy way to say I got my hands on you and I'm doing something.
yeah. Yeah, and I love how you guys treat each person individually. Like I've had friends who, pay for some online course, which is great. You can learn a
Sure.
lot from an online course, but it's so important to also have someone that you trust, like Genesis PT, to lay hands on you and help you see how that information translates to your
Mhm.
body, and the whole, like, maybe you have too much tone, or maybe you're lacking coordination, or what are your issues that you need to fix. It
Mhm.
could be different than your friends, or what Instagram
Yeah.
says.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and you're right. I mean, there's great courses out there, but nothing beats the individualized assessment and treatment, especially if you've tried the courses or the
yeah.
handouts or the Googles or the whatevers,
Yes. Yes.
and it hasn't helped. Um,
Yeah.
just do this for yourself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like to me, postpartum in particular is such a key time to pay the extra money, do what you need to do to get seen by someone. Because if
Mhm.
you were having something like a prolapse or a condition going on that's maybe, beyond the naked eye, like that could
Mhm.
really impact the rest of your life, right? If you don't get
Very
it
much so.
checked. So could you
Very
share
much so.
yeah, more about like postpartum, like what things might pop up or, the
Mhm.
importance of getting checked kind of during
Yeah.
that time frame?
Yeah, yeah. So having a baby is very, very natural. We are made to do this as women. Of course, there's sometimes it ends up being a surgical intervention, and that's technically not natural, but that's not the majority of births. And if you have that 1,000,000% warrants rehab. First of all, every postpartum mom, whether it's vaginal or C-section, needs rehab.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
especially the C-section moms, I just wanted to put that out there that
Yes.
it's like you had a major abdominal surgery, you need to
Yeah.
advocate for yourself and go get rehab
Yeah.
so that you could live your best life for the rest of
That's
time.
what
But,
yeah.
let's say that you have a vaginal birth with, it went normally and minimal complications and all the things, you might be thinking,
Yes.
"Well, I'm made to do this and maybe I
Mhm.
don't need specialized rehab."
Yeah.
And you are made to do that and know better, do better, right? And
Right.
so now that we know that in a vaginal birth, your pelvic floor muscles stretch to 3 times their normal length. No
Wow.
other muscle in the human body can do that. So it is
Wow.
made to do that.
Yeah.
And we know that after vaginal births, women are more likely to experience things like leaking, pain, and prolapse
Mhm.
symptoms. And so because we know that, and now we have information and data on how to treat that and what
Yeah.
interventions work best, aka not Kegels.
Yes.
Now that we know that, that should be the standard of care for every single
Yeah.
female. In France, over, across the pond, it actually is. You actually get 12
Wow.
sessions
That's
automatically
amazing.
postpartum to help your
Wow.
body recover. And it's
Wow.
like with anything else, early intervention is best. I mean,
Yes.
literally, there is no part of the medical world that would argue that early intervention is not ideal, right? It's not
Yeah.
that it's never too late, but early
Yeah.
intervention is always going to be the best option. And
Mhm.
so when you are healing postpartum, your tissues, they want to heal. Your body wants to
Yeah.
get back to what it was doing. So if you add good pelvic floor rehab, it's just going to make it like 1,000,000 times better, faster. You're going to feel your
Mhm.
best. You're going to be back in the gym or on the trail quicker. You're going to be much less likely to have symptoms down the road. It's
Yeah.
just going to be so good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good to hear. So it's never too late. So even if you're 70 and having issues, get seen, get checked, get help. But don't wait till you're 70. I know our mom's generation that's now like in menopause, retirement age, they were basically told, you're fine, you don't need anything after birth. But then some women in that group have had pelvic
Mhm.
floor issues, probably worse than necessary because they didn't get that rehab postpartum. Is that
Mhm.
right?
That's 100% right, and that's that generation, our mom's generation, I feel so bad for them because that's exactly what they were told. They were told, "Oh, you're fine, just go on back to life, to work, to whatever," and
Sure.
there was
Yeah.
nothing about pelvic floor rehab or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so, I think probably the data I think less of them talk about it than is what's really happening, like,
Yeah.
because they just assumed, "Oh, I guess this is just part of my life," and so they didn't even
Yeah.
think to bring it up over the
Yeah.
years because they just assumed that this was what they were stuck with. So I think
Yeah.
the numbers are probably way higher in that
Mhm.
generation of what they're dealing with, and it's probably a whole host of various
Yeah.
things, but I think the numbers are probably pretty high. If we were to honestly ask every single one of them and they answered honestly, I think we would be looking at 70-75% plus have symptoms.
Yeah. And what would you say if, say, someone thinks they're having a pelvic floor issue, maybe a prolapse, or maybe they just don't know what's going on? They go to
Mhm.
their OB and they're either told, you're fine, or they may recommend an OB might just say, oh, let's just do a hysterectomy. I'll fix your problems. What should someone do if they're either told they're fine and they're like, I really feel like I'm not fine, or hey, let's rush to remove your uterus? That's a very
Yeah.
intense thing to do.
Yeah.
Where could they go from there if
Okay.
they're
I love it. I love it. Okay. So I'm going to start with the first part, which is the you're fine. So I will say OB-GYNs and gynecologists, unless they have done the extra intentional work to learn
Mhm.
about functional pelvic floor rehab, which most of them haven't, and it's not
Yes.
their fault. It's just you need to see a pelvic floor PT, not your
Sure.
gynecologist for your pelvic floor problems, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
it's like they're not trying to dismiss you most of the time. I'm sure that there's the handful that are actually really bad doctors and people, but that's not the majority of them. The
Yes.
majority of them are doing the best with what they were taught in school, which was probably one lecture about Kegels. Okay.
Mhm.
And so if you get that answer, try your best, even though it's frustrating, you can be frustrated, but they're probably not just trying to screw you over. They probably just
Yeah.
don't know. So you can advocate for yourself. You can ask for a referral. Most
Mhm.
PTs and OTs anywhere, actually, you don't need a referral anymore. You can just
Yeah.
come see us before that. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing that people don't realize is you can just call me up and say, hey, I want to
Yeah.
see Genesis. And we're going to say, come on, girl.
Yeah.
And so you can advocate for yourself because if you
Yeah.
don't advocate for yourself, who else is going to? And
Yes.
so that's the first piece of it. The second piece is if they jump right to surgery, hysterectomy, bladder sling, whatever it
Mhm.
is, I want to shout from the rooftops that evidence, we have so much research and evidence that has proven over the recent years that pelvic floor therapy has a grade of A, which is the best that you can get in research, as
Mhm.
the first line and the best line of defense for pelvic organ prolapse, no
Yeah.
matter what grade it is, whether because there's some
Wow.
grades to it of severity.
Yeah.
And so I just want to educate that
Mhm.
this intervention of pelvic floor therapy is the most effective and the
Wow.
best choice that you can make if you have
Yeah.
prolapse, just hands down.
Yeah.
Surgery, I'm not saying is never necessary. I'm saying it's probably necessary 1% of the time,
Yeah.
frankly. And so if your doctor recommends that, just don't panic. Get a second opinion. Call up your
Yes.
pelvic floor PT. Come get an eval. We will tell you. If
Yes.
we say you need surgery, you
Yeah.
need surgery. But
Yeah.
if I'm like, girl, no, we're just gonna do some
Yeah.
rehab and you're gonna be great, you
Uh-huh.
know?
Yeah.
So it's just you have to be your own advocate.
Yes.
And that's why I want to educate the world is because you can't be your
Yeah.
own advocate if you don't know what to advocate for.
Yes.
S But once you know, then it's like you gotta do it. You gotta ask for the referral, you gotta take initiative, you
Yes.
gotta get a second opinion, all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're not in Dallas, Genesis does offer virtual consultations. And they also probably have a network where you could
Mhm.
maybe do a virtual with you guys, and then y'all might be able
Totally.
to get them hooked up with someone in Houston or wherever they're at.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I would to give you guys a plug, like when after one of my kids, I had insurance covering like a traditional pelvic PT
Mhm.
you would find at a hospital. And so I went and they basically said everything was perfect. So I went for the exam and I was like, I feel like I could have some improvements in my
Yeah.
life, but they were like, nope. Basically, unless you're like, again, your uterus is falling out, it's almost like they don't care.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying every
No.
government PT,
Mhm.
want someone paid through insurance is like that, but there
Mhm.
is like probably less
Mhm.
incentive to really provide that wellness based
Yeah.
model, right? When it's
Yeah. It's
yeah,
it's really sad because insurance the PTs, they wanna help you, but if they take insurance, their hands are tied
yeah,
because unless you're going to, flub on your documentation and lie or make things sound worse than they are on the
yeah,
test, quote, unquote,
yeah,
the insurance is not going to pay for it. So if you're in
yeah.
an insurance-based clinic and if I do your exam and you are at least 80% of your what's called like your prior level of function. So what you
Mhm,
report to me that before these symptoms, if you're at least 80% to that,
mhm.
insurance doesn't want to continue
Wow,
paying for it. And so
because it's
they're
wellness.
okay.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, that becomes wellness, maintenance, all of that stuff. They're
yeah,
okay with you not getting quite back to what you used to be.
wow.
They're okay with you being just good enough. And so the PTs want to help you. They just can't, unless they truly find something that they can report on your documentation and send it off to insurance to get it reimbursed. There's nothing that they can really do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an example of kind of our broken medical system, but, from my own life, I'm just finding it's worth it. You pay for it one side or the other. So would you rather
Sure.
pay, now for like the care that's going to get you back to your life that you loved, or are you going to like wait and put it off and then like continue to like have worse health? It's kind of like you get to
Mhm.
choose.
Yep.
Um And what would be, I guess, just some signs with someone who's pregnant or postpartum, like these are high alert symptoms
Mhm.
you need to like get checked, because
Yeah,
there may be people who are just like, oh, I think I can manage, I'll do some
yeah,
online stuff. But what are those like, you need to get checked, this isn't
yeah,
normal type
yeah,
stuff?
yeah. I would say feeling like things are falling out is a big
Okay.
one. And
Yeah.
that can be very common. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it's super, super bad and everything's terrible and
Yes.
your
Yeah.
organs are never going to be the same. But it does mean that you need good rehab. And so,
Yeah.
if you feel like, and sometimes they'll say that it feels like there's a tampon in there, but there's not, or
Mhm.
it feels heavy and like something's
Okay.
dragging, or sometimes it really is like they can
Mhm.
feel like there's like a ball in
Tissue.
there. It's like my bladder and
Yeah.
I feel it coming down. So that would be a big
Yeah.
one postpartum. That again, not to scare you guys, but just
Yes.
come to rehab and we can help you with that and get back to normal and symptom free and everything
Yeah.
like that. That if you're having those significant symptoms, that probably won't get all the way better on its own. And then significant bladder changes, so leaking, urgency or frequency. So like you feel like you're just like chained to a bathroom. You're going every 30
Yeah.
minutes or like when the urge hits to pee, it hits and you better get there or you're going to leak.
Mhm.
That would be a big one. Or if you had a tear with or without a repair, if you had a vaginal
Yes.
tear in birth and you're noticing that it's just like real tender still and it hurts to sit on
Mhm.
it, or you tried to resume intimacy and it just is hurting,
Yeah.
or of course there's like the medical red flags of like a foul odor, discharge, like I'll just throw
Yes.
that in there because that's important to be aware of
Yeah.
also. That would be for your OB-GYN though to check.
Yes.
But it's just significant pain at the tear or
Yeah.
repair site. And then of course C-section, I'm like, well, for like everyone postpartum should be coming, but you know,
Yes.
C-section mamas, like please come. We need to be helping the scar to heal. We need to be retraining your abdominal muscles that were cut through. We need
Uh-huh.
to be recoordinating those muscles with the pelvic floor. There's just so many things. There's so many things.
Okay. I have not personally had a C-section, but in my
Mhm.
mind, it's like, oh, you're a C-section, you're good. You didn't have the
Right.
baby stretching out down there. But what you're saying is it's kind of the opposite. Like there's more rehab
Yes.
necessary. Is that correct if you've had a
That's
C-section? Okay.
100% correct because not to beat a dead horse, but a vaginal birth is how we're meant to birth a baby. And so, yes, it was stretched out, but it was meant to do that. And of course there can be complications there. But a C-section, there are multiple layers of skin, fat, connective tissue,
Mhm.
multiple muscles that are cut through to be able to get the baby out, which so thankful we have this intervention. It has
Yes.
saved,
Yeah.
countless lives, both mom and baby. And it is a major surgery. And it
Yeah.
bugs me so much because that exact statement that you said, well, it didn't actually come out of my pelvic floor. So my pelvic floor is fine.
Yeah.
You have so much connective tissue that is where
Mhm.
that scar is that
Yeah.
actually connects to your pelvic floor. It connects to your bladder.
Yeah.
Not to mention the function of the abdominal muscles themselves. They are
Yeah.
besties with the pelvic floor muscles. So if
Uh-huh.
one of them was cut through, the other one is going to be impacted as well.
Yeah. And would you talk a little bit about people probably have heard of it, diastasis recti or the mommy pooch? Like, is that just like a thing that's just going to happen after you have a baby, or what can that be
Mhm.
done about that?
Yeah. So diastasis recti is essentially an overstretching of your six pack muscles, right? So like picture, the six pack muscles. I'm not saying we all have to have them because that's a whole other
They're
story.
covered by skin and stuff.
There you go. And that's very normal. But like we all know what they look like on some people's bodies, right? So like picture your
Yes.
six pack muscles, they run up and down on each side of your belly button. Okay. And so what
Mhm.
diastasis recti is there's a connective tissue, a ligament that connects those muscles in the midline. And when we're pregnant, in 100% of pregnant women, no matter what,
Yeah.
that tissue gets stretched
Has to
because
stretch.
it
Yeah.
needs to, because
Yeah.
there's a baby in there and we need to be able to
Yes.
stretch the belly to get there. And
Yep.
so that's very normal. That is diastasis recti. That is a
Mhm.
diastasis of the rectus abdominis. Diastasis
Yep.
means a stretching or an opening,
Separation. Mhm.
and
Yep.
then recti means the rectus abdominis. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when it becomes a problem is when it hasn't healed after about 6 to 8 weeks, and we have an assessment that we do for that. We can check for it super, super
Yep.
easily. There's kind
Mhm.
of some normal values that we look for, both on the width of the healing of the diastasis recti,
Uh-huh.
but also the depth of how
Yeah.
deep it goes, and then
Mhm.
kind of the integrity of the tissues at the bottom of the gap, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yes.
like a
Uh-huh.
three-dimensional assessment
Sure,
throughout
yeah.
that line. And so what we look for is, when you come in for your 6 or 8 week assessment with us,
Postpartum. Uh-huh.
yeah, we're going to be checking for that. And if it hasn't healed on its own by then, we will be initiating rehab specific to that, because we want our abdominals to be able to come back together. We want them to be able to. That's a huge part of pressure management, so that helps with leaking, prolapse pain, back pain. So we'll definitely be addressing that. But I would say in the vast majority, 60 to 70% of women, it'll be healed by about 6 to 8 weeks.
And if for some reason you weren't in that large majority, it heals naturally, there are still physical therapy exercises you can do to typically help it heal
Totally.
without needing a surgery or
Oh my
something. Is
gosh.
that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yes, yes. The only time you need a surgery for that if there's actual hernias, which a hernia is an actual tear. So that's a tear in the tissue, and that can happen in a few different places throughout the abdomen and kind of groin area. But just the diastasis recti, the stretching of it, that can heal on its own with rehab. Now,
Yeah.
women have different connective tissue
Yeah.
integrities, right? So,
Yes.
all humans are different. Some people are more stretchy and some are less stretchy. And so, I've had a mom come in who had a very, very wide one. It was an 8 finger, so that means like both
Wow.
hands whenever I assess
Oh
the
my
width of
goodness.
it. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
was really, really wide and really, really deep.
Yes.
She's great. It takes time. You have to do the exercises. You have to, do what I say, but it's totally possible because it's just a game of moving pressures. And it's one of my favorite games to play. It's just like, how do we get the pressure to stop pushing out onto your belly and move it and displace it elsewhere?
Yeah. I think, were you the one who gave me the analogy of our abdominal diaphragm and pelvic floor being kind of like a soda can and the
Totally.
managing pressures? Do you want to
Yeah.
just talk a little bit about that? Just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
just about our pelvic floor, it's all
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
connected. Yeah.
Yeah. So our abdomen, right? Our core, if you will, is shaped kind of like a can of Coke. Okay. So the lid or the upper portion of it is your diaphragm muscle. It's shaped like a dome or like an
Mhm.
umbrella.
Yes.
And then we have the cylinder of the Coke, right? So the front wall is your abdominal muscles, the side wall is your oblique muscles, and then the back wall is kind of your back muscles, your fascia, connective tissue back there. So that kind of forms this cylinder, if you can picture a Coke can. And then the bottom of the can of Coke is your pelvic floor. And so all of those things together form this Coke can shape. And they form your true core muscles. So they all have to work together. Now, in a can of Coke that we haven't opened yet, right? It's pressurized. You
Mhm.
can't squeeze it. It's made up of the liquid and then the air in there, and it's very pressurized, right?
Mhm.
If I were to take a knife and stab the front of it, that Coke is gonna spew
Yep.
out the front. Okay. So that's kind of the example for diastasis recti, is like that's pretty graphic, but it's like you just have a weakness right there in the front
Yes.
wall of your Coke can.
Yeah.
And so because there's a weakness there, the pressure kind of goes there. The pressure is always
Yeah.
going to go to the least resistance
Mhm.
spot. And so it's going to go there. And then that becomes a self-perpetuating cycle because
Yeah.
the pressure keeps pushing forward onto this lengthened, weakened tissue. And so it just kind of perpetuates itself unless you do the things to reverse the pressure, move the pressure, strengthen the wall.
Yeah. And some of that is again, you mentioned breath. Like, if
Mhm.
you are doing strenuous activities while breath holding, you're going to be putting extra pressure, right,
Mhm.
on your pelvic floor, the diastasis, if it was healing, your
Totally.
diaphragm. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. Yeah, anytime we hold our breath and move, lift, twist, get up from the floor, even just that little like that technically
Yeah.
increases the pressure inside our abdomen. And I don't want you guys to like fear this. Like, don't
Yeah.
panic and be like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna
Yeah.
like hold my breath again, but it's
Yeah.
like it does increase the inter-abdominal pressure. Now, there are times where that's helpful. This is for my power lifters out there who are
Uh-huh.
doing like 1, 2, 3 rep max lifts. Like,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
need to have some stiffness and some pressure there
Mhm.
to support your spine. But that is not most people, right? Most
Yes.
people, we don't need that much stiffness in our core and for our spine. We actually
Yeah.
need more fluidity and mobility. And so that's
Mhm.
where I always say blow before you go. So
Yep.
before you get up off the floor with your baby, just
Mhm.
right before you go
Yes.
and stand up. If you're going to exercise, blow out with the harder part of the lift.
Yes.
Yeah, those are just some easy hacks.
Yeah. The blowout with exertion.
Mhm.
And yeah, as women, it's like our pelvic floor, because it has more openings and
Mhm.
intricacies than a guy, it's just that's kind of in a way our weakest link. Like you hear more, I
Totally.
feel like, about guys, oh, I got a hernia, or
Yeah.
oh, I got a slip disc, but I don't hear as many women talking about, again, we
Yeah.
could still have the Coke can analogy, a
Yeah.
weakness somewhere on the Coke can, but most likely it's going to be on the pelvic floor if,
Totally. Yeah, that's
especially if
where
you've
the
had
quote
several births.
hole yeah, that's where the hole got poked in the can of Coke, right? Is at the
Yeah.
bottom. And that's why we leak or we have pressure or heaviness or pain, even with a tight pelvic floor. Usually it's still some level of excess downward pressure onto it. And so your pelvic floor is like guarding against it. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't want the organs to fall out. So I'm just going to squeeze. And then it just becomes
Yeah.
this chronic tension. It still usually is some version of excess pressure that it's
Mhm.
fighting against, really. And so it's all a pressure game. Just move the
Yeah.
pressure around.
And what would happen with someone who is like, I have the tight pelvic floor, I'm a horseback rider, I'm a runner, yoga instructor, like over time, what's going to
Mhm.
happen with that tight pelvic floor?
Yeah.
Like,
So if we have a tight or a tense muscle, I always like to say anywhere in the body because people can
yeah.
conceptualize like your
Yeah.
leg muscle more than your pelvic
Yes.
floor. So, like any muscle that stays tightened and shortened for a longer period of time, it loses mobility and functionality
Mm.
because
Yeah.
muscles need to be able to lengthen their full amount and shorten their full amount, no matter where they are in the body.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so when a muscle kind of gets short, tight, tense, and stays that way for, weeks, months, years, decades, right?
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
loses its functionality. It's no longer, it doesn't absorb force as well. It doesn't have as much mobility and rotation.
Yeah.
And also it does lose strength. People think, well, a tight pelvic floor must be a strong pelvic floor, but that's not true because a strong pelvic floor is one that can go through its full range of motion strongly. And so if a
Yeah.
muscle is just tight and tense all the time and it's never lengthening, it still becomes weak even though it's short and tight. And so that lends itself to a whole that lends itself to symptoms. So
Yeah. Man, that's so good. Well, I've just loved having you on today, Becky. Just a few like closing questions. What would you say is like just one of your key takeaways or things you want like every woman out there to know, either for herself or her kid, for
Mhm.
someone who's listening today?
I think I want you guys to know that if you are having pelvic floor symptoms, they don't have to be bad enough to do something about them. Even if you're not having symptoms and you're like, I just want to know a baseline of how my pelvic floor is functioning. I want to be proactive. Like,
Yeah.
I want you to know that it is okay to do that for yourself. And you should advocate for yourself because when we take care of ourselves, right? You can't pour from an empty cup is the saying, but it's like it's
Yes.
true. Like if we don't take care of ourselves, how are we going to be expected to be able to show up for our kids, for our spouses, for
Mhm.
our teams at work? And
Yeah.
so it really is that important. So I just want to encourage everyone to do that for yourself
Yes.
and stop putting yourself on the back burner
Yes.
because you're not going to be there for your
Yeah.
kids and family as well as you could if you just take
Yeah.
care of yourself and just advocate for yourself. So that's what I want to put out there is like go treat yourself to a newly functional pelvic floor.
Yes. No, that's so good, and I think especially as women, but in general, we can compensate, like you said, for so long, but then you don't want to get to menopause or, these special points in your life and then just be crumbling train wreck because you
Mhm.
were trying to compensate for so
Yeah,
long and you just can't.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
100%.
because it's like you don't want to just like make it to the finish line, whatever age God
Right.
has for us. It's like, I want to be thriving. I want to be my Nana's 90, about to be 90, and she's still doing
Oh,
Pilates and just like doing amazing. And it's like, that's how I want to be when I'm 90. I want to
totally.
be thriving and,
Yes.
living a full life. So that's
Gosh,
so good to
yes.
hear, Becky.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are the ways that our guests today could just connect with you, those who are listening, the audience?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So we post a lot of education on our Instagram account. If you're on Instagram, it's at Genesis PT Wellness. So that's our Instagram. Then, of course, our website, genesisptwellness.com. We have blogs, we have free resources, we have some things you can download, some guides, and all of that stuff. And of course, if you're like, I don't know about you, but I need to book this appointment, like you can do that
Yes.
on our website. So those are kind of the two best places to just get to know us and learn more about your pelvic floor function. And then I also am going to share with your listeners our
Yeah.
leak-free movement reset. And
Oh,
so it's
great.
basically 4 videos that I put together. They're each about between 10 and 12 minutes long. Follow along little flows that you can do, and
Yeah.
the 4 of them together are designed like you can just do, a couple a week here and there. Maybe before bed, you pick the nervous system reset. It really
Uh-huh.
will get you ready for bed. Maybe before your workout, you do the hip mobility flow, but you can kind of just
Mhm.
pick and choose and just do them. But they're designed to really begin to restore the normal, natural function of your pelvic floor muscles
Yeah.
without having to do endless Kegels for the rest of
Yes.
time to manage your symptoms. So that is
Yes.
my gift to everyone listening today.
Thank you so much, Becky.
Sure.
And what about for our listeners who maybe have a background in medicine or in therapy? What kind of resources do you have for, some of those medical therapy professionals who are looking for more? They maybe they're an OB and they're like, "Man,
Yeah.
I want to like learn more."
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. So I have my other professional Instagram, which is Dr. Becky Pelvic PT, and that's kind of my page where I post a lot of stuff geared towards the clinician, the doctor, the coach, the movement
Yeah.
professional. And so I do a lot of education on there. And then beyond that, I have my own podcast called From the Ground Up. So that is geared towards clinicians who are wanting
Okay.
to take a more zoomed out approach to treatment like we do at Genesis. And then I also have a course and I run a clinical mastermind. And so all of that stuff you can get to it through my Instagram, Dr. Becky
Okay.
Pelvic PT,
Awesome.
if you're a professional. I mean, anyone's welcome to follow me over there for
Yes.
sure. But that a lot of those resources, they're going to be more for the professional who treats this stuff. Whereas on
Yes.
the Genesis side, that's more for the person dealing with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You are just such a great person to be connected with. And we've just loved having you on the show today. So thank you for being here.
Yay. Thank you so much. It was so fun.
Yeah. This is not medical advice and is for general, educational, and informational purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listeners are advised to always consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding any medical condition or treatment plan. This information is for personal use only. Rather than asking you to comment or subscribe, we want to encourage you to share our channel with others if you found this helpful. We are committed to nurturing face-to-face relationships and encourage you to be known and seen by those in your world.